Hi, everyone, and welcome to Learning Zotero with the OSU-Tulsa Library. This workshop will be a walkthrough experience, much like previous Zotero workshops we've done in the past and previous semesters, noting new features and updates with the release of Zotero 8. So let's look at the agenda for today. So Zotero 8 has been in beta for a while, and this version is now live just as of like a couple weeks ago. Whenever we started advertising for this session, we were going to look at Zotero 7, but this new version has been released. And so we'll talk briefly about what's new with version 8, as well as what Zotero is and why people use it. And then we'll get into how to install and set up Zotero. And then we'll go over creating an account and syncing your library to your account, as well as creating groups or shared libraries. And then we'll get into organizing and creating folders or collections within Zotero, as well as adding notes and tags to make things findable. And then we'll look at examples of how to find and save sources using the OSU-Tulsa library databases and Google Scholar. And then we'll wrap up with creating citations and bibliographies. So why Zotero and what is Zotero? So if you're completely unfamiliar, Zotero is a research and citation tool. It is a free and open source reference management software that was created to help you collect, organize, annotate, cite, and share research with your colleagues and your classmates. So Zotero has a variety of potential uses. In the chat, we said, for a lit review, for your research. So you might want to use it for something like a lengthy project to organize references. Maybe you have a capstone or a thesis or a dissertation. I like it because I can use it to collect all of my citations in a single location and also attach PDFs so I can go back and view them quickly later, and then also highlight and annotate important elements and add notes and things like that. And then I like that I can use it in conjunction with Microsoft Word or Google Docs to create quick and text citations and references as I go. So then I don't have to worry about citations as much while I'm writing, and I don't have to backtrack and add citations later, which can add extra time onto a project. So it's about being efficient and saving time in your research process. Okay, so this first link here goes to zotero.org, which is the main website, which is where you can go to download Zotero, create an account, and also look at their forums and extensive documentation on how to use Zotero. And we'll cover all of that in the next slide. Additionally, the library has a Zotero guide that you can access to help you. There's tips, tricks, and the links and tutorials, as well as links to previous workshop recordings. And the direct link to that is the libguides.osu-tulsa.okc.edu/Zotero. And thank you, Vanessa, for dropping these links in the chat. So last year, with the Zotero 7 redesign, we saw a lot of big changes to both the functionality of Zotero and also the user interface or the UI. So the look of the software has changed and a lot of different features were updated. And this is a short list of what was included in that update. So if you have used Zotero in the last year, you may be kind of familiar with this list already. They created this new item pane with updated icons, added a dark mode option, density options like compact and comfortable, increased speed. So they went from a 32-bit to a 64-bit, and it's quite a bit faster than previous versions. And then upgrades to the PDF reader as well, including new annotation types like the underlining, text, and ink where you can draw on the page. And you can also convert highlights and underline text as well. And you can now also open like web page snapshots and PDFs inside Zotero without having to open a browser window. And then they upgraded the reference citation features to be smarter, and they've made the app more accessible overall. So these were the biggest upgrades from last year. And then there's even more with this latest update to Zotero 8. So the Zotero.org blog here, linked on the slide, and then Vanessa's going to drop it in the chat also, Zotero.org/blog/Zotero 8. This lists all of the updates in detail, and there's also a blog post for Zotero 7. It's a good solid update, and Zotero developers have talked about everything that's in it in detail, and they have mentioned that they're going to be working on a rapid release cycle for future updates, so you won't have to like wait a year and a half for the next update to come out. And so really this update is building on the redesign of Zotero 7 with some new updates, but the interface is largely the same. They did add several things like continuous file renaming, attachment title options, the redesigned citation dialog that has a list mode and a library mode whenever you're in Word or your word processor. Annotations in the items list have changed, a little bit of the appearance in the reader panel, note tabs and the tabs menu. And then now there's a reading mode for snapshots and autocomplete for tags and things like that. So again, you can read all of the details about these updates on their blog post, and they include the changelog in the documentation as well. And then in their forums, they have discussions, kind of continuous discussions around changes. And you may see some of these as we're walking through today as well. So at this point, We're actually going to look at Zotero.org and we'll navigate over that way. We'll click on download. If you haven't already downloaded it, we can kind of walk through how to do that. We're not going to spend too much time on downloading, but I will show you how to get there. And we'll choose our setup, and then we'll also download the connector browser extension. So let me switch my screen here and go over to Zotero.org. So on the Zotero.org homepage, in the middle of the page, you're going to see this download button in the middle of the page, this red button, as well as an image of the Zotero interface right below the button. And this is just an image of what it looks like when you open Zotero. And we're going to dive into these different sections here in a little bit. At the top of the page is where you're going to find the links to this helpful tools I was talking about, like the documentation, and then the forums pages, and also a link to the login page. So let's start by clicking this download button in the middle of the page. So on the download screen, you will see options to download the Zotero app over here on the left, as well as the Zotero browser connector over here on the right. And if you click these drop-down menus below each of these items, you will see other versions available to download for Mac, Linux, and iOS. And then you can see the connectors for other browsers as well. So today I'm going to be showing the Windows version of Zotero 8 on the Google Chrome browser and on the desktop. But if you have another setup you're using, feel free to download those and play around as we're going through. The Mac version and the Windows version, they look really similar with this update. And at this point in time, since Zotero 8 is so new, you can actually still download Zotero 7 as well. And if you're not new to Zotero and you're still on version 7, you can still use it for now. And updating to version 8 is pretty simple. You can do it from within the desktop client, or you can click this download button and it will overwrite for you. So it's also now available on mobile. I have not used it on mobile. And so if you have questions of that, I'm definitely not the expert on that. But it's now available for both Apple and Android phones and tablets as well. Last year around this time, I think it was only available for iOS, and now it's available for Android. So to get started, you're going to want to click on both the install 64-bit application and also the browser connector. And I already have mine installed, so I'm going to skip over the section. But if you do need help at all with installing it on your device, you can make an appointment with me after this workshop today and we can kind of troubleshoot. Going back to my slides quickly. So at this point, we can create an account and set up syncing. And so if you've already used Zotero and you have an account, don't worry about this part, it will all transfer over. And then we'll go through these steps through Zotero.org. So there'll be a login, register for a free account, and you determine your username, email, and password. And then you'll click login and go to my profile, and we'll see our groups in our web library. And then in the Zotero app, we'll actually get into the settings and sync your library to your client. So going back to the Zotero screen. So on the home screen here, or on this screen as well, in the top right corner, you'll see this login button. And so when you click login, it will take you to the login page. And if you haven't already created an account, you'll click on this register for a free account button right here. And this is where you'll set up your account, create a username and password. And then if you have done this, you can sync and access your library from anywhere, as well as back up your files so that you can share them with colleagues and all of that. This does not have to be your OSU email, but if you would like to use your OKey information to kind of keep things consistent for you, that's an option. If you think you might want to use this application beyond your time at OSU, like if you're graduating soon, for example, then you may want to register with a personal email address. That's just totally up to you. And so then once you register, you can log in. I'm going to go ahead and log into mine quickly. Once you log in, then you can access your web library, and you can also see groups, and you can go to your profile. So whenever you see your login up in the corner, you can click on your name and then go to my profile. And then this is a page where you can access your web library and your groups, and then you can also look at that documentation and all of that. And so if I click on my groups page here, I can see that I've already created a group. And when I open my client, I'll be able to access this group easily. And then anytime I want to manage this group or members in the group or add a new group, it will send me back to this groups page where I can do that. And then the web library, which we just saw, looks very similar to the downloaded client application version. And once your account is synced, it will sync up automatically. So if you're away from your computer, but you want to download something to your Zotero account, you can quickly log in and use this web version, which is great. So let's look at how to log into the Zotero client and set up syncing so that you can access your account from anywhere. Go back to my slides really quickly. So when you set up Zotero for the first time, you're going to get a welcome note in the middle of the screen with a link to the quick start guide. and then a link to the Zotero connector installation page, and then also a link where you can go ahead and set up syncing. And so that quick start guide links to the Zotero documentation on the website, and it's very helpful if you're just getting started, so I recommend checking that out. I believe the page to install the Zotero connector just automatically pops up as well. It's helpful to go ahead and get that installed and set up syncing before you do anything else. And so that's why we're starting with this. If you click on that setup syncing, you can click on that link as well, or you can just access the box in your settings. And so on this slide here is a picture of the Zotero settings. I'm going to open up my client, which is now downloaded. And then my account is already synced. And so instead of clicking on that setup syncing link in the welcome box, I will just show you how to access this syncing box from your settings menu. And so let me go in and go to the client here. Okay, and like I said, I already have mine downloaded and set up. And so this is what that looks like. Okay, so if you navigate up to the top left corner in your client and you click on Edit and then Settings, this is going to take you to that box that I just showed on that slide. And I can click on Sync and Settings, and that will take me to this box. Note that in previous versions, this was called Preferences, and now it's called Settings. So if you haven't logged in before, you're going to see a login screen. And from here, you can log in and link your account and choose whether or not you want to sync automatically, which is recommended, and then whether you want to sync full text content and attachment files. I like to keep this option checked so that it will grab my PDF attachments as I'm pulling in citations, which I'll demonstrate later. And if you need help with syncing, you can click on this About Syncing button, and it will take you to the Zotero documentation page on their website with all the information about syncing and document storage. Again, I highly recommend visiting their documentation if you have questions. They're very thorough. And so moving on to the next section, going back to my slides here. So we have now set up our library to sync in the client so that you can access it on the go from anywhere. And now we're going to look at the new interface together. So we're going to open up Zotero, and then we're going to check out My Library and then any group libraries. And then we'll create a new folder or a collection. They're interchangeable. And then within that folder, we'll look at how to manually add a new item, and then how to add a note and a tag. And then we'll look at the PDF viewer, and then we'll go from there. So this next slide shows the same screenshot that we saw earlier on the homepage of the Zotero website of the interface. And so we're about to jump into Zotero and look around, but I wanted to show you the breakdown of these three main sections in Zotero. So on this left side, in this column, are your libraries and collections. And so this is where we create folders and collections that live in either your library up here or a group library. And then in the middle section, we have the contents of your collections. So when we click on one of these folders in our library, we can see the contents in the middle, which would be your journal articles, books, web links, blog posts, or whatever you're including in your folder. And then over in the rightmost section, we have all of the item metadata, which is all the information about the item that makes up your citation. So when you clicked on an item in the middle, all of your citation information, notes and tags and all of that will appear over here in this right column. So this interface was the newest part of the update to Zotero 7, and it looks very similar for Mac and Windows users, and the core functionality is essentially the same. And it looks very much the same with the update to Zotero 8 as well. And so now let's get into the client and we'll dive just a little deeper. So switching back to my Zotero client. So this is my downloaded desktop application. Collections or folders are on the side, and any group libraries are at the bottom here. And there are some tags at the bottom as well. You can also edit tags over in this metadata column on the right. And so if I click on a folder here, I'm going to click on AI literacy. And then if I click on one of the contents, like this article, Awareness of AI as an Essential Digital Literacy, for example, the item metadata will pop up over here on the right panel of the screen. So in previous versions of Zotero, the buttons where you could add tags and information were at the top. But now they're over here on the right side. And so now I can click on each of these little button options over here and jump from section to section. So this is the info section. I can jump to abstract, attachment, and I can use these little arrows to expand and collapse. And so whenever you click on one of these items, you can jump to that portion. So we have the info section, which is all of the metadata that will be included in your citation. And then this one actually has a PDF attached as well. What's nice is that you can see it over here on this right side. And then any notes, group libraries, everything that's attached to it can be over here as well. So if I wanted to add a tag, I could say, okay, I'm going to call this artificial intelligence. I might also add another tag for digital literacy and so on. And so I can make any edits even if I've imported something. This item was imported, and so it automatically had the information I needed. but I can edit it manually, and I definitely should double check it for accuracy before I use it to actually create a citation. And we're going to look at how to import items shortly, but first we're going to look at how to create a new collection and add a new item. So moving back over to the column over here, I'm going to click on my library. So now I'm in this column where I can create a new collection. So I'm going to click on this little folder icon with the little plus sign in the corner that says new collection. And I'm going to call this collection dissertation. So now we have a new empty collection and we can start adding contents. So up at the top here in the middle column, you'll notice these options for adding items. So I can add a new item. I can add an item by an identifier like a DOI. I can also add attachments or notes separately as well. So if I wanted to add a new item manually, I would click New Item, this top button here, and it gives me several options to choose from. And they've added a lot of options here. So you have more traditional kinds of sources like book or book section, journal article, newspaper, a thesis, etc. But you can also now add things like audio recordings or data sets or podcasts and more. And what's great is that most of these different kinds of items can now be imported pretty easily. But if I wanted to add an item manually, I could. So for example, if I click on interview, so maybe I'm working on a dissertation and I have to conduct interviews for my research and I want to manually record that metadata and attach the audio recordings in my dissertation folder so I can quickly access them later. So that's an example of one reason I might want to make a manual edit. And so then I have my blank interview here, and then over here on the right, it takes me to the panel where I can input all of my metadata or information about my data. So I'm just going to call this dissertation interview 1, and then I can say my interview with Vanessa Greco as an example. Thank you, Vanessa. And then any other information about the interview I would put in this item here. And then I can click through or tab through with my tab button on my keyboard to add that information. I can also add notes, attachments here. So like if I had an audio file for this interview or a video file or a PDF or a Word doc, I could click on this plus sign and just add that file in as well. And you can also add notes, and you can do fun things with notes now, like you can change your color and add highlights, insert links and citations, or do a find and replace search, things like that. And then also tags. So if I wanted to tag this as dissertation, so I could come back to it later easily, that's that. And so it's pretty easy to add something manually. What's even easier is importing citations. But before we do that, let me show you the PDF reader in here. So I'm going to go back to my AI literacy folder, and I'm going to look at that article that I had pulled up earlier, this awareness of artificial intelligence. And so there's a couple different ways I can access this PDF. One, I can just double click on the item here, and then the PDF pops up in a tab next to my folder. So here's my main screen with all of my content items. And then it adds a new tab, kind of like in a browser, up and then to the right, where I can access the PDF in a PDF viewer. And so I have several options at the top here in this little toolbar. I have several options for underlining, adding notes, drawing on the page, and more. And I can now open up web page snapshots within the PDF viewer as well, and then add annotations to that. And then I mentioned this earlier. Another cool feature is that you can see your PDF over here on the side as well. And if I slide this over, I can view it here. And so maybe I'm working on metadata, but I also want to flip through. I can flip through and see my my PDF that way as well. Super convenient and very useful. Okay. So that is how to add an item manually. And then that's a little bit about how the PDF viewer works. And so I'm going to go back to my Zotero slides quickly. So moving on to finding and saving sources. So there are 4 main ways to save sources in Zotero. The manual metadata entry, which we just looked at. You can also add items by identifier, such as a DOI or ISBN. You can also import items from a file, or you can use the browser connector, which is generally the quickest and most effective recommended method. And so now that we're more familiar with the interface and know how to add items manually, we're going to add an item by identifier and then import from a file, and then we'll use the browser connector with databases in Google Scholar. So going back to my Zotero client really quickly. So I've already added my interview item manually, but now I need to go find other sources to add. So at this point, I'm going to go over to our library databases, the tulsa.okstate.edu/library link, and then we will look for articles. And then we're going to drop this link in the chat here from the library homepage. This is tulsa.okstate.edu/library. This is where I'm going to go to find articles. So on this homepage, I'm going to scroll down a bit and I'm going to click on this databases A to Z link here. Find the best library databases for your research. And this takes me to our full list of databases for all the subject areas that we offer on this campus. So maybe I'm just getting started finding articles and I haven't quite narrowed down my research topic yet. In this case, I'm going to click on Academic Search Premier, as this is a large database that covers a wide range of subject areas. And so this takes me to a page where I can start my search. And so I'm just getting started. I'm going to start with a broad search. So I'm going to type in artificial intelligence and learning outcomes, because that will be part of my theoretical dissertation topic. And I have options for filtering and narrowing down my search. If I'm just looking for books or peer-reviewed articles, I can look for that. So if I clicked on peer-reviewed, that would narrow down my search to just peer-reviewed articles. And so maybe that's what I want to start with, and then later I can come back and look for other dissertations and things like that. And so scrolling through, I like the search. I can scroll through and kind of look at my titles and scanning my titles to see what I'm interested in. And so just a quick look through, I can see, okay, I'm interested in multiple items on this list. So maybe I want to add several of them to my Zotero folder so I can take a deeper dive into my research later. So going back to my slides really quickly. So we've already looked at manually adding an item. This next option is to add an item by identifier. So I'm going to go back to my results list, and then maybe I want to add that first article by the DOI. So I'm going to click on this first article here, evaluating the effects of generative AI on student learning outcomes, insights from a meta-analysis. That looks like a great paper, pretty recent. It'd be great for my dissertation research. So when I click on this article title, it gives me a lot of information about the article on this details page. And a lot of this information on this page is going to make up the metadata that will be included in my citation information, like the author and the journal and all that information. So if I scroll down past the abstract and all of this, I can see this DOI, or the digital object identifier. The DOI is a unique string of alphanumeric characters that is assigned to an object like an article that provides a persistent and reliable link to where it lives online. So this is a great option for an identifier. So I'm going to quickly add this to my list here. I'm going to copy that DOI, and then I'm going to take that DOI and I'm going to go over to my Zotero client, and I'm in my dissertation folder. So I'm going to go to the second option here, this little magic wand, to add an item by identifier. So it's pretty simple. All I do is paste that DOI into that option there, and then I can click enter or click search, and then it grabs the information. And so that's my item there. And then over here on the right, I have all the metadata for the item. And so now my item is there along with the metadata. And now I can go in and I can edit information. I can add notes and tags and all of that. Tag dissertation, any notes that I might have as well. And this works pretty easily with books, journal articles, and other sources that have clear identifiers. Note, though, that it did not save any kind of PDF. So if I wanted to save a PDF, I would have to do that manually in addition to using the identifier. And I can do that by using the import method or the attachment method as well. So if I go back to my article, and at the top of the page, I can see we have access to this article, so I can download the article. I'm going to get the whole PDF as well. And then I can see that I have the article here. I'm going to grab that and I'm going to save it into a folder. And so now I have that article, and now I can go back into Zotero. And since I have this article here, I can go to File. I'm going to go to File and then Add Attachment, and then Attach File. And then I can click on that PDF that I grabbed earlier. And then it appears here. So you can easily also drag and drop a PDF. So if I have my folder pulled up, so I have my folder, I can also just grab the article and just drag and drop it. That's a quick way. So if you have a folder sitting on your desktop with a bunch of PDFs in it, I know that sometimes that's the quickest way to work. And I think a lot of us end up getting into a habit of just dumping everything into a folder. You can take those and you can drag them and drop them. However, notice that between this citation and this citation, the metadata isn't exactly clear. And so the drag and drop method is an option, but it's not always like the most effective option for getting a lot of the pertinent metadata. But it is an option, especially if you're in a hurry, because you can always go back and clean it up later. I can also use the import feature. So if I go to File and then Import, it tells me that I can import by several different types of files. And in the support documentation, you'll find information on importing standardized formats, and we'll drop that link in the chat as well. This is on the zotero.org. Thank you, Vanessa. Website. And so I'm going to look for this Zotero RIS format to import a document. So let me go back to the article page itself. On this details list about the article, there's a citation button. if I click on that little cite button, and then there's another button that says export citation, I can see different ways to export this. So that RIS format is what I was looking at, and I can see looking at this that is compatible with Zotero. So I can export this RIS format and then import it into Zotero. And this is something that you'll see in a lot of different databases. This is just one, the EBSCO Academic Search database, but a lot of ProQuest databases, Scopus, and other databases have a lot of these export features, and you'll notice this format is really common. And so I could do that. I could click on that button, and then I could download it. But it also recognizes with this new update that I also already have the connector downloaded. And it really prefers that I use that option. So I can say, okay, and it will automatically download it into my Zotero client using the connector. Or I can cancel that and it will just download the RIS, and then I can use that import function. So if I click OK, it goes, I'm going to save to my folder, and it adds it to my folder automatically. And so otherwise I could do file and then import and then grab that RIS file that I just saved and do it that way. And so we looked at manual metadata entry, and then we looked at the item identifier as well, import from file, and then we use that browser connector, and it is the most efficient way. So we're going to dive a little deeper into how to use that. If you click on your extensions, by the way, you can make sure your Zotero extension is pinned at the top of your page. So your browser, depending on what browser you're using, in Google Chrome, it shows up, it looks like a little puzzle piece up here, and you can select your extensions and you can pin it so that it just stays up there. So I'm back on my article here. I'm going to go back to my results list. So maybe I want to look at another article. So this next article using artificial intelligence, this one also looks interesting. And so if I'm interested in this, I can just click on it. And then at the top, when I look at my little browser connector, it looks like a little document. It kind of looks like a piece of paper, and it says save to Zotero, and I can click on that. And then it says save to dissertation, and it has my folder. I can select a different folder if I'd like, but I'm already in that folder, and so it has it pulled up. And then I can see that it grabs the article and the full text PDF in this little folder here. And then jumping over to my Zotero screen, there's that article. So it grabbed the whole article, all of the metadata about the article, as well as the PDF. And so it's really that simple. And it did a much better job of grabbing the metadata than whenever I dragged and dropped a PDF. And so now I'm going to go back to the next article, going back to my results list. And then maybe I'm interested in the following article, enhancing programming education. This looks great. And of course, I might, be a little bit more choosy about my articles, but this is just an example of, if I like an article. And so then I'm going to click on that browser connector again, saving the dissertation folder, and then going back to Zotero. And then there is that article as well. And so it really is that simple. But if I wanted to grab multiple articles at once, I could do that. And so for my results list, instead of going in and then grabbing items one by one, I could grab multiple items at once. And so if I go up to the top here, I notice that there's a folder option on the results screen with multiple articles. Got a question in the chat. Does downloading PDF take up storage space? It does, and we will talk about that a little bit later. You do get like 300 megabytes of free storage space with the free version, and then they have options where you can upgrade to get more storage space. And so some people prefer to download PDFs and save them elsewhere. And so it kind of just depends on the scope of your project and how many you have. And so, but they do take up storage space. And so this folder option up at the top, I'm going to click on that. And then when I do that, it says, here are all the articles on this page. And so there are multiple items in my results list, and I can grab all of them at once if I want to. So I'm just going to click on several of these articles as an example. And then I can click OK. And then in my folder, it will grab all the PDFs that it can. Now, sometimes it can't grab a PDF. It really tries to grab them, and on occasion it won't be able to for whatever reason. Sometimes it's a publisher permission issue, or it might be that only the metadata is available. But for what it's able to, it can grab the PDF for you. And this is really quite an improvement from previous Zotero versions. It wasn't always able to grab PDFs from multiple citations at the same time. And so that's an option. And then I see that I have multiples, and so I don't need to have multiples in this folder. So what I could do is delete some of my options. So this one, I don't want this drag and drop version, so I'm going to delete this. And I have a couple of ways I can do that. If I click the delete button on my keyboard, it will say, are you sure you want to remove this item? And I'm going to say, okay. And so now that is gone. And then I would like this other copy also gone. So I'm going to right click, and I can say move item to trash or remove item from collection. And then you can remove that option also. If I wanted to permanently remove it, I can go into my library later and look for it, and then I can move it to trash. But for now, just for a quick cleanup, I'm just removing it from this particular collection, from this particular folder. And so again, I can go in and I can grab multiple articles from a results list. I can also do this in other places like Google Scholar or on any website for that matter. For example, if I'm in Google Scholar, I can run that same search. So I've moved over to Google Scholar and I'm going to do that same search for artificial intelligence and learning outcomes. So now I have my list of results and I can do the same process. I can click on an article and then use that connector in the corner. But I can also just click on that folder again and then say, okay, well, I'd like several of these options from this page, and then click OK. And then it will grab what it can, the metadata and also the PDF if it's available, or a snapshot. I can also do this from any website as well. So maybe so if I wanted to come to this TED Talks page and like come back and look at all of these different links later, I could say, okay, I'm going to save this page to Zotero. And then it's going to add the metadata, but also a snapshot, which is kind of like a PDF. They kind of treat it like a PDF. And so whenever I go back into my Zotero, here are all my articles. And then the articles will have PDFs attached. And then this TED Talks website snapshot has the option as a snapshot. So if I click on that, I can actually pop it up. And then here's my PDF viewer. So I have my dissertation folder here. And then to the right of that, in the next tab over, I have my PDF viewer. And then next to that, I also have a website snapshot option. And so now I can actually look at a snapshot of that website if I so choose, and I could make notes. So, maybe I'm on someone's blog post or something and I want to make some notes or some clarifications or something, but I can highlight and take notes. You actually have more options with PDFs as far as your top row tagging and annotating functionalities. You can use the highlighting and underlining and all of that, add notes, and you can do some of that with your snapshots as well. So it's really neat. And this is especially fun if you have a computer with like a stylus and you like to take notes this way. So like, for example, if I wanted to add, I could say like the chapter 3, if I want to come back to that later, and I could make it green and then I could color code things. I can underline things. I can highlight text and then make a note if I so choose. So a lot of different things that you can do within the PDF reader. So going back to my slides really quickly, and we just covered how to save sources the 4 different ways: manually, item identifier, and then this browser connector, which really is the easiest and most recommended way to do this. And you can do this again through library databases, Google Scholar, or on any other website. And so moving into the last portion of today's workshop. So we now have several sources available in our folder, and the next step is to incorporate them into our writing. So in Zotero, you can set your citation preferences. You can quickly copy a citation using the quick copy, and then you can cite as you write using Microsoft Word, Google Docs, or LibreOffice. And then within these, you can make in-text citations and then bibliographies as well. And so I'm going to be demonstrating using Microsoft Word. So I'm going to open up like a new Word doc, and I'm going to make sure Zotero is open as well. Zotero also works really well with Google Docs and LibreOffice, but I'm only going to demonstrate Word today. So when you download Zotero, it automatically will add a Zotero tab in your word processor when you have it downloaded. That appears at the top of the page here. So I'm just in a blank Word document, and at the top of the page, there's a Zotero tab. And then in my Zotero client, I'm going to X out of these PDFs and snapshots there. In my client, in the settings, which I remember is through Edit and Settings, there is a Cite tab. So my settings menu, I'm going to click on Cite. And then at the bottom of this tab, I see where I have word processors, and you can look and see word processor add-in you have installed. So I have Microsoft Word already installed, but if I needed to reinstall that for some reason, it did whenever I upgraded to Zotero 8. It just automatically updated everything for me, so I didn't actually have to do anything. But if that's not the case for you, you can always go in and manually do that. Within Word, I'm clicked on the Zotero tab at the top of my document. And then when I click on that tab, I can see a couple of options. If I click on document preferences over here, where there's like a little wheel and it says document preferences, this is where I can change my citation style. If I haven't selected one yet, it will pop up and ask me to choose one, but I'm going to go ahead and preset it ahead of time. So I'm going to select APA 7 and then click OK. And then I have 2 main buttons to use within Word: this Add Edit Citation button, and then this Add Edit Bibliography. So this is what I can use to insert a new citation or edit the citation. And then I can also use this feature to add a new bibliography or edit my existing bibliography. So let's say I'm writing a paper and it's time for a citation. So I'm going to call this paper. I'm going to call this dissertation draft 1, college student learning outcomes in generative AI. And then I'm going to copy and paste, just for the sake of time, a little sentence that needs a citation. So generative AI as a tool for instruction in the college classroom can lead to positive student outcomes when used ethically, so and so. AI can make education more accessible. And so at the end of this, I'm going to need some kind of citation. And so then when I click on my Zotero tab, and then I click Add Edit Citation, it will pop up with a box. And this is that citation dialog box that was mentioned earlier. This is a Zotero 8 update. This used to look like a little red bar. So if you've used Zotero 6 or 7 or earlier versions, it looked like a red bar that was just like a list feature. And so now you have a list feature as well as a library feature, where you can actually view your library and select items to cite, which is much more handy, especially if you're trying to remember the name of the author. So I can start typing in the name of an author or the name of an article, and then I can click on that, I can double click it, and it will just start adding authors to my list. And I can do one author or multiple authors at once. And so for this one, I'm just going to click the one author, and then I can close out my citation with a period. And then I can add another sentence and add another citation, click add citation. And then for this one, I think maybe I could use multiple authors. And then I can click enter, or I can click this little arrow here to say accept. And then I can say, okay, so that's another sentence, another relevant sentence, and so on. And so you kind of get the idea. I can add and go in and click different options and then go in. I can also, if I made a mistake, I can click on the citation and then click on edit. And then maybe I meant to not add that author. I can take that author off and add a different author instead. Something like that. And so you can also edit the citation itself. It is easier to go into your library in Zotero to edit your citation. So if there was some kind of issue with this metadata here, I'd want to go into my library and then click on the article and then click into the metadata and edit it here. And then it should just auto translate into my Word document as well. So that's an option. And so maybe I'm finished with my paper and I want to pretend there's a lot more sentences here, and I'll finish, I have all my citations, and I'd like to make a reference list. I like to do this at the end. Some people like to do this as they go. You can do it as you go. I'm going to go ahead and make a references page. Let me scroll up a little bit here. I'm just going to call this page references. And so I've got my cursor here on this page. And then if I want a reference list, all I have to do is go back to my Zotero tab and then click on Add Edit Bibliography. And if I click that, it then adds a bibliography in full using all of the citations that are in text up at the top in my paragraphs. And it will grab all of them. And then if I make any edits here, it should talk to my reference list as it moves, if that makes sense. And so that's a nice option. And then you always want to double check with your citation style guide. Just a quick glance here, like this looks correct, but the next article looks incorrect as far as APA formatting. So something in my metadata here is incorrect. Another option for a quick bibliography is that quick copy shortcut. And this works with Zotero. I can go into Zotero and I can actually grab multiple citations. So I'm going to use my control button on my keyboard and just grab multiple citations. And then I can actually just drag them with my mouse and then drop them into my Word document. And so that's an interesting option as well. And again, just wanting to double check and make sure that your metadata information is accurate so that your citations will be accurate. Zotero really does a good job of maintaining proper formatting, but only if the metadata is correct as well. And so that is a nice little shortcut. There's also on the Zotero.org documentation page, there's a full list of other keyboard shortcuts. And in previous versions, they weren't always congruent, or you wouldn't be able to edit both and have it be aligned with your Zotero client and your Word doc. But I think they've made a lot of updates in that area too. Okay, so that's kind of a quick overview of how to add citations and bibliographies as you're writing your paper within a Word document. So I'm going to wrap up and go back to my slides here. Okay, so I want to wrap up with a few tips and things to be aware of when you're working in Zotero. So I want to mention again that Zotero is really, really good at formatting citations correctly in the thousands of citation styles that are uploaded into it. However, if the metadata is incorrect or incomplete, your citations are also going to be incorrect or incomplete. So just make sure you're checking that. The item type, the authors, title, dates, volume, issue, all that relevant metadata to make sure it's correct. And then troubleshooting things. If you're having problems, the typical fix is to restart your browser, restart your word processor, and then restart Zotero as well. And then double check your settings to that edit settings menu I showed you. And then making sure your browser is up to date and that all the connectors have been installed properly. And then with this newest update, some folks are finding that any third-party plugins they're using may not function the way they're supposed to. It kind of depends if there's like an individual kind of particular issue like that. And so if that doesn't solve your issue, the restarting, check out the documentation on Zotero.org and see if someone else has had the same issue, because it could be that they are working to fix it. It's an open source product and they have their developers kind of working on updating things all the time. And they are very communicative as far as like what they're doing to make updates and things like that. Another note, the question about PDF storage space in the chat. The free version of Zotero is great, but storage space is limited without a paid account to, I think, about 300 megabytes. And so if you're running low on storage space, usually it will let you know, and you can either upgrade to a paid account, or you can choose to not have them carry over your PDFs with your citation. You can turn that off. You can turn that feature off where it will grab your PDFs automatically, and you can choose to store your PDFs elsewhere, as they tend to take up a lot of space. But some people find it, if you're working on lengthy projects or if you're doing a lot of research, some people find it to be really helpful to pay for that upgraded storage. And then lastly, make sure to save your work. Save it as you go, and then save it again and save it often, especially when working in a Word document. And then one last thing I want to note quickly, we're often asked, does Zotero use AI? And at this time, Zotero doesn't have AI tools built in, and it really doesn't need them. Zotero does, however, support integration with AI through third-party plugins. Some people do use AI assistant browser extensions with Zotero, and there are AI tools out there such as Research Rabbit that do integrate with Zotero, but it's not necessary in order to use Zotero. And so we're going to wrap up with questions. So thank you so much for attending the OSU-Tulsa Library Workshop on Zotero. We have covered a lot today, and if you have questions or if you want to make an appointment for help with Zotero or help with your research paper, you can use this QR code here to book an appointment, or you can email me directly at zane.ratcliffe@okstate.edu, or you can visit our website at tulsa.okstate.edu/library to chat with us or send in any questions you have. Okay, so at this point, I'll go ahead and stop the recording and we will open the floor to questions.